Marcus Thompson's phone buzzed at exactly 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of late-night summons that never brought good news. The message from Victoria Sterling contained 2 words and no punctuation. My office, now. He stared at the screen in his darkened home office, the glow illuminating 3 years' worth of careful navigation about to collapse. The Morrison merger had cratered that morning. 18 months of work vaporized when the target company's financials revealed creative accounting that bordered on fraud. Marcus had flagged the discrepancies 2 weeks earlier, but the senior team had pushed forward anyway, hungry for the commission. Now someone would take the fall, and late-night summons from the CEO rarely ended with congratulations. The drive to Sterling & Associates took 17 minutes through empty downtown streets. Marcus kept his hands steady on the wheel, practicing the same discipline that had carried him through worse. 3 years ago, he'd driven these same roads at 2 a.m., rushing Sarah to the emergency room, her hand cold in his, both of them knowing the breast cancer had won. He'd held himself together then. He could hold himself together now. The office tower loomed dark except for the executive floor, a single rectangle of light on the 42nd story. Marcus's badge granted him after-hours access, a privilege that might expire before sunrise. The elevator's ascent felt slower than usual, each floor a countdown to unemployment. He thought about Emma asleep at home, Mrs. Rodriguez dozing on the couch, his 7-year-old daughter's future resting on whatever happened in the next hour. Victoria's corner office door stood open, light spilling into the darkened hallway. She sat behind her desk, still in the charcoal suit she'd worn to the board meeting that afternoon, but her hair had come loose from its usual severe twist. The Ice Queen, the financial press called her. 4 years as CEO of her father's firm, and she'd never given them reason to question the title. Marcus stepped inside, and she gestured to the chair across from her without looking up from whatever document held her attention. The silence stretched long enough for him to catalog the changes since his last visit to this office. A new Rothko print on the west wall, a crystal award from some industry association, the faint scent of jasmine tea instead of her usual black coffee. When she finally spoke, her voice carried none of the steel he'd expected. Close the door. He did, and the soft click of the latch felt like a trap springing shut. Victoria set down the document and met his eyes for the first time. In 3 years of working under her leadership, Marcus had seen her reduce executives to stammering apologies with a single raised eyebrow. But right now, her hands were trembling. I'm pregnant. The words came out clinical, like she was announcing quarterly earnings. 12 weeks. It's yours. The office tilted. Marcus gripped the armrest, his mind racing through calculations he didn't want to make. 12 weeks. 3 months. That meant the anniversary gala, Victoria continued, reading his thoughts. 3 months ago. The memory hit with physical force. That night existed in a separate compartment in his mind, filed under mistakes he'd agreed never to acknowledge. He'd stayed late finishing a presentation, noticed her office light still on past midnight. He'd knocked, expecting to find her reviewing reports, not sitting on the floor behind her desk, mascara tracked down her face, an empty glass beside her. My mother died this afternoon, she told him, her voice stripped of its usual authority. I was in a meeting when the hospital called. A meeting I'd scheduled because I thought I had more time. Marcus had never seen Victoria vulnerable. He hadn't known she was capable of it. But that night she wasn't the CEO, or his boss, or anyone's idea of an ice queen. She was just a woman who'd lost her mother, sitting alone in an office because she had no one else to call. He should have offered condolences and left. Instead, he'd found himself sitting beside her on the floor, talking about Sarah, about loss, about the guilt that never quite faded no matter how many people told you it wasn't your fault. One conversation became 2 drinks, became something neither of them had planned. In the morning, they'd agreed without discussion. It never happened. They'd returned to their roles, CEO, and senior analyst and pretend that moment of weakness didn't exist. Biology, apparently, had other plans. Victoria pulled a leather folder from her desk drawer and slid it across to him with the same efficient motion she used in board meetings presenting acquisition offers. I've consulted with legal. You have 3 options. Option 1, complete confidentiality. I handle this privately and your name never appears in any documentation. Option 2, a formal agreement outlining limited parental rights and financial obligations. Option 3, stop. The word came out harder than Marcus intended, but he was tired of being managed. Just stop. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, the only indication that his interruption had surprised her. She was used to people following her lead, accepting whatever framework she established. You're presenting this like a quarterly earnings report, Marcus said, trying to keep his voice level. Like it's a problem to be managed with the right legal structure. Because that's what it is. Victoria's composure was reconstructing itself, each word more controlled than the last. I didn't plan this. I've never wanted children, and I certainly never intended to complicate both our careers with a situation that could destroy everything we've built. So what are you going to do? The question hung between them. For the first time since he'd known her, Victoria Sterling didn't have an immediate answer. Uncertainty flickered across her face, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. I don't know, she admitted. That's why I needed to tell you first, before I make any decisions. Marcus stood and moved to the window. 42 floors below, the city churned with people who had no idea his carefully constructed life was crumbling. He thought about Emma, home right now with the babysitter, probably asleep with the stuffed bunny Sarah had given her for her 3rd birthday. He thought about what this would mean for her. A father suddenly entangled with his boss, their family becoming office gossip, playground whispers about the man who'd slept his way into the CEO's favor. He thought about Sarah and what she would tell him to do. Don't live like life is a prison sentence, she used to say, usually while trying to convince him to take a risk he'd already decided was too dangerous. You're so afraid of making mistakes that you forget to actually live. I need time to think, Marcus said finally, not turning from the window. The city lights blurred, and he realized his eyes had watered. Of course. Victoria's professional mask clicked back into place with audible precision. Take whatever time you need. My door is open when you're ready to discuss options. Options. There was that word again, as if they were negotiating a contract instead of discussing a child. Marcus left without another word, and the drive home felt longer than the drive in. Every red light gave his mind another opportunity to spiral through worst-case scenarios. His career was built on being above reproach, the black analyst who delivered results so consistently that even the skeptics had to acknowledge his competence. What would happen when people found out he'd slept with his boss? It didn't matter that it was one night, didn't matter that they were both single adults, didn't matter that no professional boundaries had been crossed before or since. The story would write itself. Ambitious black employee sleeps his way into the CEO's favor. He could already hear the whispered assumptions, see the knowing looks from colleagues who'd always searched for reasons to discount him. When Marcus finally pulled into his driveway, the porch light was on and Emma's silhouette was visible in the living room window. His daughter. His reason for everything. Inside, Mrs. Rodriguez gave her usual report. Homework finished, dinner eaten, only 30 minutes of screen time, and left with a cheerful wave. Marcus found Emma curled on the couch with a book, her reading glasses slightly askew. At 7, she was already showing signs of the woman she'd become. Smart, observant, with Sarah's eyes and his stubborn determination. She'd been 3 when Sarah died, young enough that her memories of her mother came mostly from photographs and stories Marcus told her. Sometimes he caught her staring at old pictures, trying to hold on to something she could barely remember, and it broke his heart all over again. Hey, Dad. Emma looked up from her book. You're home late? Meeting ran long. The lie came easily, and Marcus hated himself for it. Emma studied him with that unsettling perceptiveness she'd inherited from Sarah. "You okay? You look weird." "Just tired." Another lie. They were stacking up quickly. Marcus busied himself in the kitchen, reheating leftovers he had no appetite for. Through the pass-through window, he could see Emma pretending to read while actually watching him. She always knew when something was wrong. She just didn't always push. Tonight, she pushed. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, book tucked under her arm, that familiar determined expression settling over her features. "Dad, you can tell me if something's going on. I'm not a little kid anymore." Marcus looked at his daughter, this fierce, brilliant girl who'd already survived more loss than most adults. She deserved better than a father who hid things from her. But she also deserved a father who had answers. And right now, Marcus had nothing but questions. "It's just work stuff," he said, the partial truth feeling heavier than an outright lie. "Nothing you need to worry about." Emma's expression flickered with something that looked like disappointment. "Okay." She turned and walked back to the living room, and the soft sound of her retreat hit harder than any accusation. Marcus stood alone in the kitchen, the microwave humming beside him, thinking about all the ways his life was about to change. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, he sat in his home office staring at the photograph of Sarah on his desk. They'd taken it on their honeymoon, her laughing, him pretending to complain about the camera angle, both of them young and stupid enough to think they had forever. "What would you tell me to do?" The question went unanswered, but he could imagine Sarah's response. "Since when do you run from hard things?" The truth was he'd been running for years, running into work, into routine, into the safety of being so perfect that no one could find fault. He'd convinced himself it was for Emma, for stability, for survival. But maybe it was just fear wearing a more respectable mask. Friday morning arrived too quickly. Marcus dropped Emma at school, watching her disappear into the building with her oversized backpack and that slight limp she got when she was tired. The mitral valve prolapse had been detected at birth, a heart murmur that required monitoring but hadn't caused serious problems yet. The cardiologist said surgery might be necessary eventually, but for now, Emma just needed to avoid overexertion and come in for regular checkups. For now. 2 words that haunted every parent of a child with a chronic condition. Marcus arrived at Sterling & Associates an hour early, a habit he'd developed years ago. Being the first one in, the last one out, it was armor against the assumptions people made about black professionals who didn't fit their preconceptions. Victoria was already in her office, visible through the glass walls that separated the executive suite from the rest of the floor. She was always in her office. Marcus sometimes wondered if she slept there. The morning passed in a fog of emails and spreadsheets. Marcus forced himself to focus on a financial model for a potential acquisition, but the numbers kept blurring. Around 10, he noticed movement in Victoria's office. A meeting with the CFO, then another with the head of investor relations. Business as usual, except Victoria kept glancing toward his desk through the glass walls, and Marcus kept pretending not to notice. At 2:30, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, Victoria's name appeared. "Need to talk. Not office. Coffee shop 2 blocks south. 4 p.m. The coffee shop was aggressively generic. Exposed brick, reclaimed wood tables, a chalkboard menu featuring 7 variations of overpriced espresso. Victoria sat in the back corner, laptop open, looking like any other professional grabbing an afternoon caffeine hit. She'd changed from this morning's navy suit into jeans and a sweater, her hair down. Marcus had never seen her in casual clothes. It made her look younger, more human. He slid into the seat across from her, and she closed the laptop. "I've decided to keep the baby," Victoria said without preamble. No greeting, no small talk. "I'm telling you as a courtesy before I inform HR and the board." Marcus took a breath, trying to organize thoughts that had been racing for 16 hours. And my involvement? That's your choice. The legal team has drafted documents for either scenario. Full parental rights with shared custody, or complete separation with financial support. Your name doesn't have to appear on the birth certificate if you prefer confidentiality. There it was again, the clinical approach, as if emotional detachment could protect them both from the mess they'd created. Marcus thought about Emma's question from the night before, her disappointment when he'd lied. He thought about Sarah telling him to stop being so afraid of living. "I'm not disappearing," Marcus heard himself say. "Whatever you decide about custody arrangements or legal agreements, I need you to know something. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. I'm not going to let you handle this alone just because it's more convenient for everyone." Victoria stared at him as if he'd started speaking a language she didn't understand. "Do you realize what you're saying? If people find out, I know exactly what happens if people find out." Marcus kept his voice low but firm. "I've been calculating those risks my entire professional life. Every meeting, every presentation, every interaction gets filtered through the question of how it will be perceived. I've spent 15 years trying to be so perfect that no one could question whether I belonged in the room." He leaned forward, holding her gaze. "But I have a daughter at home who's going to grow up and ask me what kind of man I am. And I refuse to be the kind of man who walks away because it's easier." Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not quite softness, but a crack in the armor. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both." The ghost of a smile touched Victoria's lips, there for a second before vanishing behind her usual control. "I haven't told anyone yet. Not Amanda, not the board. But once I do, things are going to get complicated very quickly. They're already complicated." Victoria's phone buzzed on the table between them. She glanced at the screen, and her expression tightened. "Richard Hayes just called an impromptu senior leadership meeting for tomorrow morning. He's been positioning himself for months, waiting for any sign of weakness." Richard Hayes, the COO who'd been at Sterling & Associates for 12 years, always hovering one step below the top, watching Victoria with barely concealed resentment. He'd made his opinions clear at last quarter's board meeting. The CEO position should have gone to someone with operational experience, not the founder's daughter trading on her last name. "You think he knows?" Marcus asked. "I think he suspects. Richard has informants everywhere." Victoria gathered her laptop and stood. "Be careful, Marcus. Once this becomes public, you're going to be the one who suffers most. People will say you manipulated your way into my favor. They'll question every promotion, every project, every success you've ever had." "I know." "Do you?" Victoria's voice dropped, taking on an intensity that caught him off guard. "Because I've spent 20 years in this industry. I know how these stories end. The woman gets called ambitious or calculating. The man gets called predatory. And if the man happens to be black..." She stopped herself, but the implication hung between them. Marcus had lived that reality his entire career. He didn't need her to spell it out. "I knew the risks when I told you I wouldn't walk away," he said. "That hasn't changed." Victoria studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once and walked toward the exit without another word. Marcus sat alone at the reclaimed wood table, watching her disappear into the afternoon crowd, wondering if he'd just made the bravest decision of his life or the stupidest. Saturday morning, Emma woke him at 7 with her usual efficiency, a gentle shake of his shoulder and a whispered, "Dad, I'm hungry," that meant she'd already been awake for an hour trying to let him sleep. Marcus hauled himself out of bed and found her in the kitchen, attempting to make cereal, but struggling with the milk jug that was too heavy for her to manage safely. "Let me help, baby." He took the jug and poured, watching her concentrate on keeping the bowl steady. Sarah used to make elaborate weekend breakfasts, pancakes shaped like animals, French toast with fresh berries. Marcus had never mastered that level of domestic creativity. Most mornings, cereal was victory enough. Emma ate methodically, swinging her legs under the table. She'd laid out a piece of paper beside her bowl, covered in crayon drawings. Marcus recognized the style: stick figures with elaborate details. Emma had inherited Sarah's artistic eye, if not yet the technical skill to match it. "What are you working on?" he asked, pouring coffee that was 3 parts exhaustion, 1 part caffeine. Emma held up the drawing. "It's the lady from your office, the one who looks sad all the time." Marcus's chest tightened. The figure was clearly Victoria, rendered in Emma's distinctive style with careful attention to details like the severe hairstyle and the sharp angles of her business suit. But Emma had drawn her without a smile, just a straight line for a mouth. "When did you see her?" Marcus tried to keep his voice casual, but Emma was too perceptive to miss the tension. "Last week, when you forgot your phone and I came to bring it. She was in the big office with the windows. Mrs. Rodriguez drove me." Emma tilted her head, studying her own creation. "She has pretty brown eyes, but she looks like she forgot how to smile. Like you did after Mommy died." The observation landed with devastating accuracy. Marcus sat down across from his daughter, this 7-year-old who saw too much and understood even more. "Why do you think she looks sad?" he asked. Emma shrugged, the gesture pure child despite the wisdom in her words. "Sometimes people get stuck being sad." "You were stuck for a long time. Then you learned how to smile again. But it took a while." "Did it bother you when I was stuck?" Emma considered the question with the seriousness she brought to everything. "A little. But Mommy told me it would happen. Before she got really sick, she said you might be sad for a while, but I should be patient, because you loved me even when you couldn't show it right." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Sarah had been so careful in those final weeks, preparing Emma for a future she wouldn't see, teaching their daughter to understand grief before she was old enough to spell it. "Your mom was pretty smart, huh?" "The smartest." Emma returned to her cereal, then added with the casual tone children use for bombshells, "You should help the sad lady learn to smile again. You're good at that." Monday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Marcus dropped Emma at school, watching her join the cluster of second graders near the playground. She turned and waved, her backpack nearly as big as she was, and he waved back, thinking about how much life could change while still looking exactly the same from the outside. The office buzzed with the usual Monday energy, people clutching coffee, comparing weekend stories, settling into routines. Marcus kept his head down, focusing on the acquisition analysis that was due by Wednesday. Around 10, he noticed movement in Victoria's office. Richard Hayes and 2 other senior executives filed in, the door closing behind them. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see Richard doing most of the talking, Victoria's expression neutral and controlled. At the coffee machine, 20 minutes later, Marcus overheard 2 junior analysts talking just loud enough to carry. They didn't know he was there, separated by a partition, but close enough to catch every word. "Did you see Thompson coming out of Sterling's office again Friday afternoon? 3rd time in 2 weeks. I heard he's been getting all the premium assignments lately. Morrison merger, the Techstone acquisition analysis, that consulting project for the board. Must be nice to have that kind of access." Marcus's hand tightened around his coffee cup. The analysts moved away, still talking, and he stood frozen behind the partition. It had started. The whispers, the speculation, the slow erosion of 15 years of earned credibility. And Victoria wasn't even showing yet. What would happen when she was visibly pregnant, when the timeline became obvious, when people started doing math? Wednesday afternoon, Marcus was called into a conference room on the 38th floor. Helen Cross, the head of human resources, sat at the head of the table flanked by 2 lawyers he didn't recognize. The setup screamed trouble. "Mr. Thompson," Helen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with us." "Of course." Marcus kept his voice steady, professional. "What's this about?" "Just some standard questions regarding your recent interactions with Miss Sterling." Helen opened a folder in front of her, the gesture somehow making the informal conference room feel more like an interrogation chamber. We've noticed you've had an unusual number of private meetings with the CEO over the past month. More than your position would typically require. Marcus felt the walls closing in. This was it, the beginning of the end. But he'd known it was coming, had chosen this path anyway. Miss Sterling has been consulting me on several high-priority projects: the Morrison merger, the Techstone analysis, the board's strategic planning initiative. Our meetings have all been work-related. I'm sure they have. Helen's tone suggested otherwise. However, given the company's policies on workplace relationships and the potential appearance of impropriety, we need to ensure that all professional boundaries are being maintained. The questions continued for 45 minutes. When did these meetings start? What was discussed? Had there been any personal contact outside of work hours? Had Marcus received any special treatment or opportunities that might be perceived as favoritism? Marcus answered carefully, truthfully where he could, evasively where necessary. The lawyers took notes, their expressions giving nothing away. By the time Helen dismissed him, Marcus's shirt was damp with sweat under his suit jacket. He walked back to his desk on legs that felt disconnected from his body, hyper-aware of every glance from colleagues, every conversation that stopped when he passed. That evening, Victoria was waiting by his car in the parking garage. Marcus did a quick scan for security cameras, for other employees, for anyone who might see them together and add fuel to whatever fire was already burning. I heard about your meeting with HR, Victoria said without preamble. The underground garage made her voice echo slightly, lending the conversation a surreal quality. I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened. It's fine. I handled it. It's not fine. Victoria's voice carried an edge he rarely heard, anger but not directed at him. Someone on the board is fishing for information. Richard has been questioning my leadership for months, and now he thinks he's found ammunition. What are you going to do? Victoria didn't answer immediately. In the harsh fluorescent light of the parking garage, she looked exhausted in a way that makeup couldn't hide. The pregnancy was still early enough to conceal, but Marcus could see the strain wearing on her. I don't know yet. She met his eyes, and for a moment, the armor dropped completely. But I need you to understand something. If this becomes public, if anyone finds out about us, you'll be the one who suffers most. People will say you manipulated your way into my favor. They'll question everything. Your competence, your integrity, your right to be in that office at all. I know. Do you really? Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice even though they were alone. Because I've spent 20 years watching this industry destroy people. I know how the story gets written. The powerful woman and the ambitious man. And if he happens to be black, they don't even try to hide their assumptions. Marcus had heard this his whole life. The unspoken question behind every achievement. Did you really earn that, or did someone give it to you? The constant need to prove himself, twice as worthy, 3 times as qualified. The exhausting mathematics of professional survival as a black man in predominantly white corporate spaces. I knew the risks when I told you I wouldn't walk away, he said. That hasn't changed. Victoria studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once and walked toward her own car without another word. At home, Emma was waiting with a look Marcus had come to dread, the look that said she had questions he wasn't ready to answer. Mrs. Patterson next door asked me something weird today, Emma announced as Marcus hung up his coat. She wanted to know if you were dating anyone. Marcus froze. Mrs. Patterson was the neighborhood's unofficial information broker, a retired teacher with too much time and too much interest in other people's business. What did you tell her? I said no. Was I supposed to say something else? No, that was the right answer. Emma crossed her arms, a gesture she'd picked up from watching him. Dad, you've been acting strange for weeks. Coming home late, checking your phone constantly, barely eating dinner. Whatever's going on, I can handle it. Marcus looked at his daughter, this 7-year-old girl who'd already handled more than any child should. She'd lost her mother at 3, watched her father disappear into grief for months, learned to be independent in ways that sometimes broke his heart. She deserved the truth. But the truth would change everything, and Marcus wasn't sure either of them was ready for that. "It's complicated," he said, hating himself for the evasion. "Work stuff. I promise I'll explain when I can." The disappointment in Emma's eyes cut deeper than any HR interrogation. "You always say that." She turned and walked to her room, closing the door with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Marcus stood in the empty living room, the walls closing in, thinking about dignity and truth and the impossible mathematics of doing right by everyone. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Board meeting scheduled for Friday. Richard is making his move. Be ready." Ready for what? Marcus stared at the message, then at Emma's closed door, then at the photograph of Sarah on the mantel. His wife smiled out at him from that frozen moment in time, forever young, forever healthy, forever certain that love was worth any risk. "Don't live like life is a prison sentence." Her voice in his memory, clear as if she were standing beside him. "You're so afraid of making mistakes that you forget to actually live." Marcus set down his phone and knocked on Emma's door. It was time to stop running. Time to tell at least part of the truth. Time to be the father his daughter deserved, even if he didn't have all the answers. But when Emma called, "Come in," her voice small and hurt through the door, Marcus found himself frozen in the hallway. The words he needed wouldn't form. The explanations felt too heavy. He stood there for a long moment, hand on the doorknob, caught between the life he'd built so carefully and the unknown future rushing toward him whether he was ready or not. Finally, he opened the door. Emma sat on her bed, surrounded by drawings, dozens of them spread across her comforter. All variations on the same theme, the sad lady with no smile. Victoria rendered in crayon and marker and colored pencil, each version capturing something Marcus hadn't quite articulated to himself. The loneliness, the armor, the humanity buried under layers of professional control. "She's important to you," Emma said, not quite a question. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the gallery of drawings. "Yeah, baby, she is." "As important as Mommy was?" The question could have been a trap, a test, a 7-year-old's attempt to understand loyalty and love and loss. But Emma's face held only curiosity, that same open honesty she brought to everything. "Different," Marcus said carefully. "Your mom will always be the most important person I ever knew. But that doesn't mean there's no room for anyone else to matter." Emma considered this, then picked up one of the drawings. "Mommy told me something before she got really sick. She said you might find someone new someday, and that would be okay. She said love doesn't run out." Marcus felt his throat close. Sarah had been so deliberate in those final weeks, planting seeds for a future she wouldn't see, teaching their daughter lessons about grief and healing and the stubborn persistence of hope. "She was right about that," he managed. "So are you going to help the sad lady learn to smile? Like I helped you?" Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. Marcus pulled Emma into a hug, this wise, brave girl who saw the world with devastating clarity. "I'm going to try, baby. It's complicated, but I'm going to try." Emma hugged him back, her small arms tight around his neck. "Good. Because nobody should be sad forever." Saturday morning arrived with text messages Marcus wasn't prepared to receive. The first came at 8:15 a.m. while he was helping Emma practice her spelling words at the kitchen table. "I'd like to meet your daughter. If we're doing this, she should know who I am." The second followed 30 seconds later. "Today, if possible, before I lose my nerve." Marcus stared at his phone, watching the implications multiply. Emma looked up from her workbook, fork suspended halfway to her mouth with a piece of French toast Marcus had actually managed not to burn. "Who is it?" The lie would have been easy. Work emergency, forgotten meeting. anything to buy more time. But Emma's question from last night still echoed. You always say that. Marcus had promised himself no more evasions, even when the truth felt impossible. A friend from work wants to come over, if that's okay with you. Emma's eyes narrowed with the skepticism of a child who knew she wasn't getting the whole story. The sad lady? Her name is Victoria, and yes. Is she your girlfriend? Marcus took a breath, trying to find words that weren't lies, but weren't more truth than a 7-year-old needed. It's complicated, but she's important to me, and I think you'd like her. Emma considered this with the gravity she brought to major decisions. Okay, but you have to make pancakes, not French toast. First impressions matter. Victoria arrived at 10:30 wearing jeans and a cashmere sweater Marcus had never seen before, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She stood on the porch holding a bakery box like it was a shield, and Marcus recognized the fear in her eyes, the same expression she'd worn that night in her office when everything unraveled. This woman commanded boardrooms and intimidated executives, but the prospect of meeting a 7-year-old had stripped her armor completely. Emma opened the door before Marcus could reach it, studying Victoria with open curiosity. You're prettier than in my drawings. Victoria blinked, visibly caught off guard. Thank you, I think. Come in. Dad's making pancakes, but he's not very good at it yet. Emma stepped aside, already walking back toward the kitchen with the casual authority of a child in her own home. Marcus took the bakery box, croissants still warm, and found himself alone in the entryway with Victoria. Up close, he could see the exhaustion she'd been hiding, dark circles under her eyes that makeup hadn't quite concealed. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I did. Victoria's voice carried the same determination she used in board meetings, but underneath it ran a current of something raw. If I'm keeping this baby, if you're not walking away, then she deserves to know who I am before rumors start. The kitchen smelled like burnt butter and optimism. Emma had set the table with Sarah's good plates, the ones they only used for special occasions, and arranged a small vase of dandelions she must have picked from the backyard. Marcus watched Victoria take in the scene, the cheerful chaos of a child's breakfast setup, the stick figure drawings covering the refrigerator, the memorial photograph of Sarah on the windowsill surrounded by Emma's handmade decorations. Emma patted the chair beside her. You can sit here. Dad burns things when he's nervous, so you should probably watch him. Victoria sat, her movements careful, and Marcus found himself grateful for his daughter's easy confidence. Emma chattered through breakfast about her spelling test, her best friend Olivia's birthday party next week, the book she was reading about a girl detective who solved mysteries. Victoria listened with an intensity that suggested she was cataloging every detail, trying to decode the rules of a world she'd never inhabited. My mom died when I was 3, Emma announced between bites of pancake, the statement delivered with the matter-of-fact tone children use for tragedy they've integrated into their normal. Do you remember being 3? Victoria set down her fork, and Marcus could see her recalibrating in real time. Not very well. I remember my father's office. He used to bring me to work sometimes. Was he nice? He was busy, but yes, when he had time, he was nice. Emma absorbed this, then pointed to Sarah's photograph. That's my mom. She was a doctor. A really good one. She had brown eyes like you. Victoria's gaze moved to the photograph, lingering on Sarah's smile. When she looked back at Emma, something had shifted in her expression, a crack in the professional facade. She was beautiful. Yeah. Emma's voice went soft. Dad says I look like her, but I think I look more like him. Except my eyes. The conversation shifted to safer ground, school, favorite colors, whether pancakes were better than waffles. But Marcus caught the way Victoria's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. A gesture so brief, he might have imagined it. Emma caught it too. His daughter missed nothing. Are you sick? Emma asked, the question direct but not unkind. Victoria's eyes met Marcus's across the table, a silent question passing between them. He gave a small nod. Emma would figure it out eventually. Better she heard it now from them than pieced it together from playground whispers. "I'm pregnant," Victoria said, her voice steady despite the tremor Marcus could hear underneath. "It's very early still, but yes." Emma's expression cycled through surprise, calculation, and something Marcus couldn't quite maim. "Is it Dad's baby?" The bluntness of childhood left no room for evasion. Victoria's composure wavered, but she held Emma's gaze. "Yes. So I'm going to have a brother or sister?" "A sister, probably. The doctors aren't sure yet, but yes. You would be her big sister." Emma processed this information with the seriousness she brought to complex problems. Marcus held his breath, waiting for anger or confusion or any of the reactions a child might reasonably have to this news. Instead, Emma picked up her fork and returned to her pancakes. "Okay, but you should know, I'm really good at being a big sister. I've been practicing with Olivia's little brother." The relief that washed over Victoria's face was so naked that Marcus had to look away. She'd been braced for rejection, for tears, for the complicated emotions of a child processing a major life change. Emma's simple acceptance had demolished her defenses more effectively than any breakdown. After breakfast, Emma insisted on showing Victoria her room, a shrine to creative chaos featuring a gallery wall of her artwork, a bookshelf organized by color rather than any system that made sense to adults, and a collection of stuffed animals with elaborate backstories. Victoria sat on the floor, listening to explanations about which bears were friendly and which ones were secretly royalty, and Marcus leaned against the doorframe, watching the Ice Queen of Sterling and Associates learn the mythology of a 7-year-old's imagination. "This one is Mr. Patches," Emma said, holding up a threadbare rabbit. "Mommy gave him to me before she got really sick. She said he'd protect me when she couldn't anymore." Victoria reached out and touched the rabbit's worn ear with unexpected gentleness. "He's done a good job then." "Yeah, but sometimes I worry he's getting tired. He's pretty old." Emma set the rabbit back in its place of honor on her pillow. "Do you have any stuffed animals?" "Not anymore. I did when I was your age, but they got lost somewhere along the way." Emma considered this tragedy with appropriate gravity. "That's really sad. Everyone should have at least one." That night, after Emma had brushed her teeth and changed into pajamas covered with stars, she appeared in the living room where Marcus and Victoria sat on opposite ends of the couch, maintaining careful distance. "I'm ready for stories," Emma announced, clutching her current favorite, a worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are that had been Sarah's as a child. Marcus started to stand, but Emma shook her head. "Miss Victoria should read it. She needs to practice." Victoria's eyes widened slightly, but she took the book Emma offered. They settled on the couch, Emma nestled against Victoria's side with the ease of a child who'd never learned to fear affection. Marcus watched Victoria open the book, her movements stiff, and begin reading in the same formal tone she probably used for quarterly reports. "The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind," Emma interrupted. "No, you have to do the voices." "The monsters have to sound scary, but not too scary. And Max has to sound brave." Victoria glanced at Marcus, something close to panic flickering across her face. He gave her an encouraging nod, and she tried again, this time adding inflection that was stilted but genuine. By the third page, Emma was making corrections. The monster voice should be deeper, and Max wouldn't say it like that. He'd be more excited. Victoria adjusted, her readings getting looser, more playful. When she reached the part where the wild things roared their terrible roars, she actually growled, and Emma dissolved into giggles. "Better. Now say I love you like you really mean it. That's the most important part." Victoria read the line, "And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all." But her voice caught on the last words. Emma looked up at her, studying Victoria's face with that unnerving perception. "Say it again," Emma commanded, her voice gentle but insistent. The part about being loved. But this time, believe it. Victoria's hands trembled slightly on the pages. She read it again, slower this time, and Marcus heard the emotion she couldn't quite hide. Wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Perfect, Emma declared, satisfied. She snuggled deeper against Victoria's side. You're learning. After Marcus tucked Emma into bed and returned to the living room, he found Victoria standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself. The evening had painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, and the light caught her profile in a way that made her look younger, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Thank you, she said without turning around, for letting me do this, for not shutting me out. She likes you. She's extraordinary. So wise and so innocent at the same time. Victoria finally faced him, and Marcus saw tears she was fighting to control. I don't know how to be what she needs, what this baby will need. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding exactly this kind of connection. Marcus crossed the room, stopping just short of touching her. Nobody knows how to be a parent before they become one. Sarah and I had 9 months to prepare, and we still had no idea what we were doing when Emma arrived. But you figured it out. We made it up as we went, got things wrong more often than right. The only thing we knew for certain was that we loved her. Marcus took a risk and reached for Victoria's hand. Her fingers were cold. That's the only qualification that really matters. Victoria looked down at their joined hands. I'm terrified of this. Of failing. Of being like my mother, giving up everything and ending up with nothing. Your mother didn't end up with nothing. She had your father's company, a family, a life. She died alone in a nursing home while I was in a meeting I'd scheduled because I thought I had more time. Victoria's voice broke on the last word. I spent 40 years watching her sacrifice her own ambitions for my father's empire, and I swore I would never make that trade. Never depend on anyone. Never let love make me weak. Marcus pulled her closer, and she didn't resist. Needing someone isn't weakness. Then what is it? Being human. They stood like that for a long moment, and Marcus felt the wall between them cracking. But before either could say anything else, Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She pulled away to check it, and her expression transformed from vulnerable to guarded in an instant. Richard Hayes just sent the board his proposal for leadership transition during CEO medical leave. She looked up, her eyes hard. It's starting. Monday morning brought Helen Cross to Marcus's desk at 9:15 a.m., flanked by the same 2 lawyers from the previous week. The open plan office meant everyone could see her arrive, could watch Marcus being summoned for the second time in 5 days. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The whispers would start before he even reached the conference room. This time the questions were more pointed. When exactly had his relationship with Victoria Sterling begun? Had he received preferential treatment in project assignments? Could he provide documentation of his qualifications for the Morrison merger? Had there been any discussion of personal matters during work hours? Marcus answered each question with the same careful precision, but the lawyer's expressions remained neutral, giving nothing away. After 90 minutes, Helen leaned back in her chair with the expression of someone about to deliver bad news dressed up as procedure. Mr. Thompson, we appreciate your cooperation. However, given the ongoing investigation and the need to avoid any appearance of impropriety, we're placing you on paid administrative leave effective immediately. The words landed like physical blows. Marcus kept his face neutral through years of practice, but inside, something was crumbling. For how long? Until we complete our review. 2 weeks minimum, possibly longer depending on what we find. Not fired, not yet, but removed from his projects, stripped of his access, sent home like a problem to be managed. Marcus gathered his things under the watching eyes of colleagues who'd worked beside him for years. People who would now question everything they thought they knew about his competence. Richard Hayes stood near the executive suite, not even trying to hide his satisfaction. Emma's school called at 2:15 p.m., while Marcus sat in his home office staring at the wall, trying to process his new reality. The nurse's voice carried the carefully controlled urgency of someone trained not to panic parents. "Mr. Thompson, Emma fainted during recess. She's conscious now, but her lips were blue and her pulse was weak. We've called an ambulance." Marcus was in the car before the nurse finished the sentence. The drive to Children's Memorial Hospital took 18 minutes that felt like 18 hours. He found Emma in the ER, small and pale against white sheets, monitors beeping a rhythm that made his chest tight. She managed a weak smile when she saw him. "Hi, Dad. I'm okay." But the doctor, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Dr. Martinez, pulled Marcus aside for the conversation no parent wants to have. The mitral valve prolapse had worsened. The fainting episode was a warning. Surgery might not be optional much longer. Marcus called Victoria without thinking, his hands shaking too much to find anyone else's number. She answered on the first ring. "Emma's in the hospital. Children's Memorial, 4th floor." His voice sounded wrong, distant. "She fainted. Her heart. I'm coming." Victoria arrived 40 minutes later, still in her business suit, her heels clicking purposefully down the hospital corridor. Marcus stood when he saw her, and she went straight to Emma's room without asking permission. Emma was awake, tired but stable, and her face lit up when Victoria walked in. "You came! Dad said you'd be too busy." Victoria sat in the chair beside the bed and took Emma's hand. "I'm never too busy for you." Marcus watched from the doorway as his daughter and the woman carrying his child talked quietly. Emma explained what had happened. She'd been playing tag, felt dizzy, woke up surrounded by teachers. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking gentle questions, stroking Emma's hair with a tenderness Marcus hadn't known she possessed. Dr. Martinez returned with test results. The episode had been triggered by exertion, but the underlying issue was deteriorating faster than they'd hoped. They'd need to schedule surgery consultation, discuss options, potentially operate within the next 6 to 12 months, rather than waiting for Emma to be older. "She's strong," Dr. Martinez assured them, "and the surgery has a very high success rate. But we do need to be proactive." After Emma fell asleep, Marcus and Victoria sat in the waiting area outside her room. The hospital hummed with quiet activity. Nurses making rounds, machines beeping, families huddled in various states of worry. Victoria's hand found his, and they sat in silence for a long time. "Tell me about when Sarah died." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. "If you can." Marcus hadn't talked about it in detail for years. Most people didn't really want to know. They wanted sanitized grief, the version that made them feel better about their own mortality. But Victoria's question held genuine need to understand, not comfort. Breast cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. She fought for 18 months. Marcus stared at their joined hands. At the end, she was so weak she could barely speak. But she made me promise something. "What?" "Not to let grief make me a ghost. Not to stop living just because she couldn't." Marcus's throat closed around the words. She said Emma would need a father who was present, not just physically there. And she said I might find someone else someday, and that was okay. That love doesn't have an expiration date. Victoria's grip on his hand tightened. "My mother spent 40 years supporting my father's company, gave up her law degree, her ambitions, everything. When he died 5 years ago, she didn't know who she was without him. I watched her fade away, and I swore I would never be that dependent, never need anyone so much that losing them would destroy me." "But you're alone." Marcus turned to face her. "Is that freedom, or just another kind of cage?" Victoria met his eyes, and he saw her struggling with defenses that had kept her safe for decades. I don't know anymore. Watching you with Emma, seeing how you've built this life after losing everything, it terrifies me. Because it looks like the thing I've been running from might actually be what I need. Tell me what scares you most. The question hung between them. Victoria took a long breath. Failing. Being weak. Becoming my mother. Giving up everything and having nothing left when it ends. She paused. But mostly, wanting this. Wanting you. Wanting a family. Because the moment I admit that, I lose control. Marcus brushed a strand of hair from her face. Tell me you're actually happy. Right now, with your perfect corner office and your controlled life and your walls keeping everyone out. Look at me and say you're happy. Victoria tried to hold his gaze, but couldn't. Tears spilled over despite her attempt to contain them. I can't. The confession broke something open between them. Marcus pulled her close, and she buried her face against his shoulder, her careful composure finally cracking. They sat like that while hospital life continued around them, two people learning to need each other, despite every instinct telling them it was dangerous. Emma woke an hour later and found them still together, Victoria's hand in Marcus's, her head resting against his shoulder. Emma's smile was knowing and satisfied, the expression of a child who'd predicted this outcome all along. Marcus returned to his forced leave the next day, but the isolation felt different now. Victoria texted him updates from the office. Richard was moving quickly, consolidating power, positioning himself as the stable alternative to a CEO dealing with personal complications. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday, and the outcome seemed increasingly inevitable. Wednesday afternoon, Richard Hayes appeared at Marcus's door unannounced. Marcus opened it to find the CEO standing on his porch with the casual confidence of someone who held all the cards. Can I come in? We should talk. Marcus stepped aside, gesturing Richard into the living room. Emma was at school, the house empty except for the ticking kitchen clock and the weight of impending confrontation. Richard settled into the armchair like he owned it. I'm going to be direct, Thompson. You're a good analyst. Great, even. You've got a future in this industry, just not at Sterling. Is this where you offer me a severance package? $850,000. Recommendation letter to any firm you choose. Clean break. No drama. Richard pulled a document from his briefcase and set it on the coffee table. One signature, and you walk away from all of this mess with your reputation intact and your bank account comfortable. Marcus picked up the document, scanning the dense legal language. Buried in the third paragraph, he found it. Complete and irrevocable relinquishment of all parental rights to any child or children resulting from relationship with Victoria Sterling. You want me to abandon my child? I want you to think about Emma. Richard's tone shifted to something that might have passed for concern if Marcus didn't know better. She needs stability. Not her father dragged through scandal, not playground whispers about how daddy slept his way into the boss's favor. Your daughter deserves better than watching you destroyed. The words were calculated to hit every vulnerability Marcus carried. Emma's well-being, his reputation, the practical reality of fighting a system designed to protect people like Richard while crushing people like him. The money would secure Emma's future, college, medical bills, everything Sarah had wanted for their daughter. Marcus set the document back on the table untouched. My daughter deserves a father with integrity. She deserves a father who can actually provide for her. One scandal-free employed father instead of one unemployed, disgraced former analyst. Richard leaned forward. Be realistic, Thompson. This isn't a battle you can win. Victoria is going to lose her position within the month. You're already on leave. Your career at Sterling is over either way. The only question is whether you walk away with something or with nothing. You're not offering me something. You're offering me a comfortable cage. Marcus stood, the movement controlled despite the rage building in his chest. Intent doesn't erase impact, Hayes. Your money can't buy my dignity. Get out of my house. Richard's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. I've made plenty. This isn't one of them. After Richard left, Marcus sat alone in the empty house thinking about dignity and survival and what he was teaching Emma by refusing. The practical voice in his head, the one that had kept him safe through 15 years of corporate navigation, screamed that he was being stupid. $850,000 would solve so many problems, but it would create a bigger one, teaching his daughter that self-respect had a price tag. His phone rang, Victoria's name on the screen. The board is voting Friday on Richard's proposal. They're going to install him as permanent CEO and put me on indefinite medical leave. Her voice was flat, drained. My lawyer says I should settle, accept the terms, move on. Is that what you want? Silence stretched across the line. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice was so quiet, Marcus had to strain to hear it. I want to keep fighting. But I'm tired, Marcus. And I'm scared that fighting just means dragging you down with me. She took a shaky breath. Maybe Richard's right. Maybe the best thing I can do for everyone is step aside. You can take his offer. I can accept the board's terms, and we can both walk away before this destroys us. Marcus felt something in his chest compress. You're choosing the corner office over us. I'm choosing survival. For all of us. No. You're choosing fear. Like you always do. Victoria's sharp intake of breath was audible even through the phone. That's not fair. It's true. You're so terrified of being your mother that you've become something worse, someone who has everything and risks nothing. At least your mother loved enough to make sacrifices. You won't even try. The words were cruel, designed to wound, and Marcus regretted them even as they left his mouth. But Victoria had already hung up. Emma came home from school to find Marcus staring at his phone, trying to decide if he should call back or let the silence stand. She dropped her backpack by the door and climbed onto the couch beside him with the directness of a child who knew something was wrong. Did you have a fight with Miss Victoria? Yeah, baby, we did. Emma considered this, her expression thoughtful. Grown-up fights are different than kid fights. When Olivia and I fight, we just stop talking for like an hour. Grown-ups stay mad longer. Sometimes we do. Are you mad because she's scared? Emma tilted her head, studying him with those two wise eyes. You look at her the way you looked at Mommy when she was sick. Like you're trying to fix something, but you don't know how. Marcus pulled Emma into a hug, grateful for her insight even when it cut too close to truth. You're too smart for 7. Mommy used to say that too. Emma pulled back to look at him seriously. She told me something else. Before she died. She said sometimes people need to fight to know they care, because easy things don't mean as much as hard things. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Sarah's wisdom delivered through their daughter's voice, about Victoria's fear and his own anger, and the baby growing between them while everything else fell apart, about dignity and survival, and whether there was any meaningful difference. His phone buzzed at 11:48 p.m., an unknown number he almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Thompson? This is Dr. Reeves from St. Catherine's Medical Center. You're listed as emergency contact for Victoria Sterling. Marcus was moving before the doctor finished explaining. Victoria collapsed at home. Severe preeclampsia, blood pressure dangerously high, baby in distress. Amanda had found her unconscious, laptop still open, surrounded by work she'd been doing despite doctor's orders to rest. The drive to St. Catherine's passed in a blur. Marcus arrived to find a cluster of Sterling executives in the waiting room. Richard Hayes, Margaret Powell, 3 other board members. Richard blocked his path with barely concealed satisfaction. Family only, Thompson. Before Marcus could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Thompson, Miss Sterling is asking for you. The silence that followed was profound. Richard's face registered shock, then fury, then calculation. Margaret Powell watched with interest. Marcus walked past all of them, following the nurse down the corridor while feeling the weight of every stare. Victoria lay in the hospital bed, hooked to monitors that beeped warnings Marcus didn't understand. Her face was swollen, her usual control stripped away by medical crisis. When she saw him, tears spilled over. "You came." Marcus took her hand, and it was cold despite the heated room. "Of course I came." "I'm sorry. For what I said. For being such a coward." Victoria's words came fast, panicked. "The doctor says the baby's okay, but I have to stop working. Complete bed rest. And I can't do it. I can't stop. If I stop, Richard wins. The company my father built." "Victoria, stop." Marcus squeezed her hand. "You're killing yourself." "I don't know how to be weak. Weakness is death in my world." "Needing someone isn't weakness." Victoria's face crumpled. "I'm scared. Of failing. Of being like my mother. Of needing you so much that when this ends, and it will end because everything ends, I won't know who I am anymore." Before Marcus could respond, a commotion outside the room drew his attention. Emma's voice, young and insistent, demanding to be let in. Marcus stepped into the hallway and found Margaret Powell standing with his daughter, Mrs. Rodriguez hovering anxiously behind them. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Rodriguez began. "She insisted. She made me drive her." "I didn't know what else to—" "It's okay." Marcus knelt to Emma's level. "How did you know?" "I heard you leave. I know what hospital sounds mean." Emma's expression was fierce. "Is she dying? Like Mommy did?" "No, baby. She's sick, but she's going to be fine." "Can I see her?" Marcus looked at Margaret Powell, who nodded once. He led Emma into the room, watching his daughter take in the medical equipment, the monitors, Victoria's swollen face, and fear-filled eyes. Emma walked straight to the bed and took Victoria's hand without hesitation. "You have to fight. My mommy fought really hard. You can too." Victoria stared at Emma, something breaking in her expression. "I will. I promise." "Good. Because the baby needs you. And Dad needs you. And maybe I need you too, a little bit." The simple honesty of it shattered whatever remained of Victoria's defenses. She pulled Emma into an awkward hug, mindful of the IV lines and monitors, and cried like Marcus had never seen her cry, not with the controlled tears of someone performing grief, but with the raw, ugly sobbing of someone who'd finally stopped running from what she felt. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep in the chair beside the bed, and Marcus had arranged for Mrs. Rodriguez to take her home, he and Victoria sat in the dark hospital room, listening to machines count heartbeats. The baby was stable. Victoria would survive. But the doctor's orders were clear: complete bed rest until delivery, or risk losing everything. Victoria stared at the ceiling. "Richard's going to get exactly what he wants. Let him have the corner office. You're getting something better." She turned her head to look at him. "What?" "A chance." Marcus moved his chair closer to the bed. "A chance to figure out who you are without the title. A chance to be something other than your father's daughter running his company. A chance to be happy instead of just successful." "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I. But Emma's teaching both of us, if we let her." Victoria's hand found his in the darkness. "I love you. I'm terrified. But I love you." Marcus had been waiting for those words without realizing it. "Say it again. Look at me and say it." Victoria met his eyes, and even in the dim light he could see the fear and the hope warring in her expression. "I love you, Marcus. I love Emma. I don't know how to do this, but I want to try. From the doorway came a small, satisfied voice. "See, Daddy? She's learning to mean it." Emma stood there, sleep-rumpled and grinning, having apparently woken up for the most important part. Marcus started to scold her for eavesdropping, but she just climbed back into her chair and announced, "You can keep talking. I'll just listen. This is better than my detective books." Victoria laughed, a real laugh, the kind Marcus had never heard from her, and for the first time since this whole impossible situation began, he thought they might actually survive it. Victoria's mandatory bed rest transformed her penthouse into a prison she'd designed herself. Marcus visited daily, bringing updates she didn't want to hear. Richard was moving fast, scheduling board votes, restructuring departments, positioning himself as the crisis manager Sterling and Associates desperately needed. The investigation into favoritism had concluded with a finding of no policy violations but serious concerns about judgment and professionalism. Clean enough to avoid lawsuits, damaging enough to justify everything Richard wanted. 2 weeks after Victoria's collapse, Marcus sat in his home office staring at email from the external audit team. They'd cleared him of misconduct. Every project he'd led showed merit-based selection, industry-standard performance, client satisfaction above company averages. The numbers proved what Marcus had always known. He'd earned every assignment through competence, not favoritism. But vindication felt hollow when no one would see the report. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away, and Richard had the votes locked. Margaret Powell had called twice trying to convince Marcus to attend, to speak, to defend himself and Victoria publicly. Both times he'd declined. What was the point of fighting a battle that was already lost? Emma found him like that Thursday afternoon, home early from school for a teacher planning day, her backpack sliding off one shoulder. She studied him with the expression she got when working through difficult math problems. "You're giving up." Marcus looked up, surprised by the accusation in her voice. "It's complicated, Em." "No, it's not. The mean man is trying to take away Miss Victoria's job, and you're just letting him." Emma dropped her backpack and crossed her arms. "That's not what heroes do. Baby, this isn't a storybook. Sometimes in real life, the bad guys win." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. "Mommy didn't think like that. When the doctor said the cancer was too bad, she didn't give up. She fought until she couldn't fight anymore." The comparison hit like a fist to the chest. Marcus started to explain the difference: medical battles versus corporate politics, life or death stakes versus career considerations, but Emma wasn't finished. "You told me you loved Miss Victoria. You told me love means not running away when things get hard." Her small hands clenched into fists. "So why are you running away now?" Marcus had no answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Emma grabbed her backpack and headed to her room, pausing in the doorway to deliver one final blow. "Mommy said real life has heroes too. She said you were hers. I guess she was wrong." The door closed with terrible finality. Marcus sat frozen, his daughter's words echoing in the silence. Sarah's face smiled at him from the photograph on his desk, forever young, forever certain that courage mattered more than comfort. He could almost hear her voice. "Since when do you let fear make your decisions?" His phone buzzed. Margaret Powell's name on the screen. "Thompson, I'm coming over. We need to talk." She arrived 30 minutes later carrying a leather briefcase and the determined expression of someone who wouldn't take no for an answer. Marcus led her to the living room, where she settled into the armchair Richard had occupied just days earlier. "The board votes tomorrow at 2 p.m. Richard has 6 votes confirmed, maybe 7. Victoria's out on medical leave. You're suspended." He's positioned this as crisis management, installing stable leadership while the CEO deals with personal complications. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "But he's made mistakes. and I need you to help me expose them. Marcus took the document she offered. Financial records, carefully highlighted. Ghost vendors, inflated invoices, money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. Numbers that told a story of systematic theft stretching back 3 years. Richard embezzled $1.8 million. He's been covering it by directing audits away from certain accounts, burying discrepancies in legitimate expenses. Margaret's voice was hard. I found it 2 weeks ago while reviewing financials for the board vote. I've been working with the FBI since. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow, Richard is going to present his case for permanent CEO appointment. The board will vote. He'll win. Unless someone stands up and fights. Margaret leaned forward. I can expose the embezzlement, but I need someone to speak first. Someone who can remind that board why Victoria deserved her position, why the investigation into you was garbage, why Richard's entire narrative is built on lies and prejudice. I'm not on the board. I have no standing. You have truth. That's standing enough. Margaret's expression softened slightly. Your wife Sarah consulted for us years ago. Strategic planning, financial forecasting. Brilliant woman. She told me once that her husband would change this company someday, that he had the integrity and courage we needed. Marcus felt his throat close. Sarah said that? She believed it. Question is, do you? After Margaret left, Marcus sat with her words and Emma's accusation and Sarah's faith, pressing down on him from all sides. The smart move was staying quiet, taking Richard's money, protecting Emma from the fallout. But Emma didn't want protection. She wanted a father who fought for what mattered. Marcus knocked on her door. She was lying on her bed, surrounded by drawings, all variations on the same theme. Stick figures facing down dragons. He recognized himself in the hero's stance, Victoria beside him, Emma holding their hands. I'm going to the board meeting tomorrow, he said quietly. I'm going to fight. Emma looked up, hope and vindication warring on her face. Good, but I need you to understand something. I might lose. Richard might win anyway, and if he does, things are going to get harder before they get better. That's okay. Fighting is better than hiding. Emma sat up, her expression fierce. Mommy taught me that. Now I'm teaching you. Friday arrived with the weight of inevitability. Marcus dressed in his best suit, the one Sarah had bought him for his first big presentation, the one he saved for moments that mattered. Emma appeared in his doorway as he was knotting his tie. You look like a hero. I feel like I'm about to throw up. Mommy said that's how you know you're doing something brave. Emma handed him something. Mr. Patches, her worn rabbit. For luck. He's protected me since Mommy left. Now he'll protect you. Marcus knelt and pulled Emma into a hug, this extraordinary child who'd already taught him more about courage than a lifetime of corporate survival had. I love you, baby girl. I know. Now go fight the dragon. The Sterling & Associates boardroom occupied the entire east wing of the 45th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, a mahogany table that could seat 30, portraits of company founders lining the walls. Marcus arrived at 1:45 p.m. and found the waiting area outside already occupied, executives, lawyers, assistants, all preparing for the meeting that would reshape the company's leadership. Richard stood near the entrance talking to 2 board members, his expression satisfied. When he saw Marcus, surprise flickered across his face before settling into contempt. Thompson, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm here to speak to the board. You have no authority, no standing. This is closed session. Margaret Powell emerged from the boardroom, her timing too perfect to be coincidence. Let him speak, Richard. The board can decide whether his testimony is relevant. Richard's jaw tightened, but he couldn't refuse without looking afraid. Marcus followed Margaret into the boardroom, feeling the weight of 14 pairs of eyes assessing him. The board members sat in a semicircle, men and women who controlled billions in assets, who'd built careers on reading people and calculating risk. They would give him 5 minutes if he was lucky. He needed to make them count. Richard opened with his presentation, smooth and practiced. Victoria's medical leave created leadership vacuum. The investigation into workplace relationships, while concluding with no policy violations, had damaged client confidence. Stock price had dipped 3%. 2 major clients had requested reassurance. The company needed stability, proven operational excellence, someone without the complications that came with personal entanglements. I propose permanent CEO appointment effective immediately, with Victoria Sterling transitioning to emeritus board member with full severance and benefits. A clean break that protects the company while honoring her contributions. Richard clicked through slides showing organization charts, efficiency metrics, profit projections. We need leadership that can focus entirely on business, without distraction. The presentation lasted 20 minutes. When Richard finished, the board chair, a silver-haired man named Thomas Cartwright, looked toward Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, Margaret tells us you have something to say. You have 10 minutes. Marcus stood, his mouth dry, Emma's rabbit tucked in his jacket pocket. He prepared nothing, brought no slides, carried no props except the truth Margaret had given him and the audit results clearing his name. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm a senior financial analyst. I've worked at Sterling & Associates for 15 years, and I'm the father of Victoria Sterling's child." The room went absolutely still. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Richard's expression was triumphant. Marcus had just confirmed everything they suspected. "I'm telling you this because secrets have power only when they're hidden. Richard wants you to believe that my relationship with Victoria compromised my professional judgment, that I received favorable treatment, that I'm some kind of predator who manipulated his boss for career advancement." Marcus pulled the audit report from his pocket and set it on the table. "The external audit says otherwise." He walked around the table, making eye contact with each board member. "This report shows that every project I led was assigned based on merit. My performance reviews were top 3% for 6 consecutive years, 3 of those years before Victoria became CEO. My client retention rate is 94%. I've brought in $43 million in new business. I have industry awards from 2 different professional associations." Marcus stopped in front of Richard. "The only thing different about me is that I'm black, and I've spent 15 years being twice as good to get half as far. Not because I wanted sympathy, because I have dignity. I deserve respect. You can question whether I should have gotten involved with my boss. I've questioned it myself every day for the past 3 months. But you cannot question whether I earned every project, every promotion, every success through my own merit and hard work." Thomas Cartwright cleared his throat. "Mr. Thompson, we appreciate your passion, but this doesn't address the central concern. Your relationship with Mrs. Sterling creates an appearance of impropriety that damages the firm's reputation. Then judge Victoria Sterling by the same standard you judge everyone else in this room. Her work." Marcus's voice hardened. "She increased profits 41% in 4 years. She landed Fortune 500 contracts that everyone said were impossible. She rebuilt this company's reputation after your previous CEO nearly bankrupted it through bad acquisitions." He turned to face the full board. "My daughter had heart surgery consultation last month. Mitral valve prolapse. She might need invasive surgery within the year. Victoria, Ms. Sterling, was there. She held my hand through 4 hours of tests and consultations. She read bedtime stories to a 7-year-old she barely knew. She learned to do the voices because Emma said that's what made them real." Marcus felt his voice crack, but pushed through. "That's not scandal. That's grace. That's a woman learning to be human after spending 20 years proving she could be as ruthless as any man in this room. And you want to destroy her for it." The silence that followed was broken by Richard's cold laugh. "This is very touching, Thompson, but it doesn't change the facts. Victoria's judgment is compromised. Yours is compromised. The company needs The company needs leaders without criminal records. Margaret Powell stood, her voice cutting through Richard's speech like a blade. Which brings us to an interesting question about your leadership qualifications, Richard. Margaret distributed folders to each board member with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this moment carefully. Over the past 3 years, Richard Hayes has embezzled $1.8 million through ghost vendors, inflated invoices, and carefully buried accounting discrepancies. Richard's face went white. That's absurd. I've been directing the finance team. You've been directing audits away from accounts you control, hiding theft behind legitimate expenses. The FBI has been investigating for 2 weeks. They have warrants ready. Margaret looked at Thomas Cartwright. I notified federal authorities this morning that we'd be presenting this evidence today. They're waiting in the building. Richard lunged for the door, but 2 federal agents were already entering. The lead agent, a woman with sharp eyes and a badge that read Special Agent Taurus, addressed Richard with bureaucratic precision. Richard Hayes, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud. You have the right to remain silent. The arrest happened in surreal slow motion. Richard protesting, demanding lawyers, looking at the board members for support that didn't come. The agents leading him out in handcuffs while the entire room watched in stunned silence. The door closing behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than Richard's shouted accusations. Thomas Cartwright broke the silence. Well, that was unexpected. Margaret resumed her seat as if nothing unusual had happened. I recommend we table the CEO appointment discussion until Victoria can address the board herself, preferably after she delivers her baby and recovers from medical leave. Agreed. Cartwright looked at Marcus. Mr. Thompson, you mentioned an audit clearing you of misconduct? Marcus handed over the document. Cartwright reviewed it quickly, then passed it to the board member beside him. It made its way around the table, each person reading with expressions that shifted from skepticism to surprise to something approaching respect. The audit concludes that all project assignments were merit-based and that Mr. Thompson's performance exceeded expectations across all measurable metrics. Cartwright set the report down. It also notes that the anonymous complaint triggering the investigation came from a company email account registered to Richard Hayes. The implications settled over the room like falling snow. Richard had fabricated the entire favoritism accusation to cover his own crimes and position himself for Victoria's job. I move to reinstate Marcus Thompson immediately with full back pay and a formal apology. Margaret's voice was crisp. All in favor? 12 hands rose. Only 2 abstained. The vote was recorded, the meeting adjourned, and Marcus found himself surrounded by board members offering handshakes and carefully worded acknowledgments of error. It felt less like vindication than simply having the truth acknowledged after months of being treated like it didn't exist. Margaret walked him to the elevator. Sarah would be proud. You did good work in there. You did the hard part, the investigation, the evidence. I provided ammunition. You provided the courage to use it. Margaret pressed the elevator button. Your wife told me something else years ago when we worked together. She said the most dangerous thing wasn't being afraid. It was letting fear make you small. You chose not to be small today. The elevator arrived and Marcus stepped inside. Thank you. For believing her. For believing me. Character recognizes character, Thompson. Don't forget that. Marcus drove straight to Victoria's penthouse, still riding the adrenaline of the board meeting. Amanda let him in with a knowing smile. Apparently, news of Richard's arrest had already spread through company channels. He found Victoria on her prescribed bed rest setup in the living room, laptop precariously balanced on her very pregnant stomach, trying to work despite doctor's orders. She looked up when he entered, her expression cycling through hope and fear. Did they? Richard's been arrested. FBI took him out in handcuffs in front of the entire board. Marcus sat beside her, and the story poured out. Margaret's investigation, the board vote, Richard's crimes exposed, his own reinstatement. It's over. You can come back whenever you're ready. Victoria closed her laptop with shaking hands. I don't know if I want to. The confession surprised him. What? These past weeks on bed rest, I've been thinking about what matters. The corner office, the CEO title, proving I could run my father's company better than anyone expected. Victoria placed a hand on her stomach. None of it feels as important as it did 3 months ago. You're scared. Terrified, but not of losing the job. She met his eyes. I'm scared of going back and losing this. Whatever this is that we're building. You, Emma, this baby. The first time in my adult life, I felt like something other than my father's daughter, or the Ice Queen, or someone proving a point. Marcus took her hand. You don't have to choose. Family and career aren't mutually exclusive. They were for my mother. Your mother lived in a different time, with different options. You're not her. Marcus squeezed her hand. Emma's teaching me something. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Being a good father doesn't make me a worse analyst. Loving you doesn't make me less competent. It makes me more human. Victoria's eyes filled. I don't know how to do this. How to need someone without losing myself. Nobody does. We'll figure it out together. Marcus brushed tears from her cheek. But right now, you focus on one thing. Keeping you and this baby healthy. The board can wait. The company can wait. We can't. 2 weeks later, Victoria went into labor at 36 weeks, earlier than planned but not dangerously so. Marcus got the call at 4 a.m. and made 2 stops before the hospital. Mrs. Rodriguez to watch Emma, and Emma's room to explain where he was going. Emma sat up in bed, instantly alert. Is it time? Yeah, baby. The baby's coming. Can I come see her? After? As soon as the doctors say it's okay. Emma grabbed Mr. Patches and pressed him into Marcus's hands. Give this to Miss Victoria, so she knows we're with her. The delivery was efficient and terrifying in equal measure. Victoria labored for 8 hours, Marcus beside her the entire time, both of them discovering that childbirth was nothing like the sanitized versions shown in movies. It was messy and painful and absolutely ordinary. Women had been doing this for millennia, but it felt miraculous anyway. At 1:34 p.m., Grace Sarah Thompson Sterling entered the world at 5 pounds, 11 ounces, screaming her outrage at the indignity of being born. The nurses cleaned her and wrapped her in standard-issue hospital blankets and then placed her in Victoria's arms. Marcus watched Victoria's face transform. All the armor, all the control, all the careful distance she'd maintained for 42 years. It shattered completely. She looked down at their daughter with naked wonder, tears streaming unchecked, and Marcus fell in love with her all over again. She's perfect, Victoria whispered. She's absolutely perfect. Grace Sarah Thompson Sterling. Marcus touched his daughter's tiny hand, and her fingers curled around his reflexively. Sarah would. His voice broke. Victoria looked up at him, understanding written in her expression. She gave you the courage to love again. Our daughter should carry her name. Victoria adjusted the blanket, and Grace made a small sound that might have been contentment. It's only right. Emma arrived 3 hours later with Mrs. Rodriguez, carrying a hand-drawn card that read, Welcome, baby sister, in careful printing. She approached the hospital bed with unexpected shyness, as if unsure of her role in this new configuration. Victoria held out a hand. Come meet Grace. Emma climbed carefully onto the bed, studying the tiny bundle with scientific interest. She's really small. You were smaller when you were born. Only 4 pounds. Really? Emma touched Grace's hand, and the baby's fingers wrapped around her finger just as they had with Marcus. Emma's face lit with delighted surprise. She's holding me. She knows you're her big sister. I'm going to be the best big sister ever. I've been practicing. Emma looked up at Victoria with sudden seriousness. Are you going to be my mom too? Like my real mom? Because you could be if you wanted. Victoria's composure, already fragile, crumbled completely. She pulled Emma into a one-armed hug, careful of the baby between them. I could never replace your mom. She was extraordinary, and she loved you so much. I know, but Mommy's in heaven, and you're here. Emma's logic was simple and devastating. Can I have two moms? One who watches from up there, and one who's here with me? Marcus watched Victoria struggle to answer, saw her trying to navigate this enormous question from a 7-year-old who'd already lost one mother. Finally, Victoria found words. I would be honored to be your mom on Earth, if your dad says it's okay. Both of them looked at Marcus. He thought about Sarah telling Emma that Daddy might find someone new someday, about the way Victoria had learned to read bedtime stories with voices, about Emma's wisdom that love multiplied rather than divided. Yeah, baby. I think Mommy would really like that. That night, after Emma and Mrs. Rodriguez left and Grace was sleeping in the bassinet beside Victoria's bed, Marcus and Victoria sat in the quiet darkness of the hospital room. Recovery would be long. Victoria's preeclampsia meant extended monitoring, and Grace's early arrival required extra care. But for this moment, everything was still and perfect. I don't want a co-parent from separate houses. Victoria's voice was quiet but firm. I don't want scheduled visits and custody arrangements and careful distance. What do you want? Victoria turned to face him fully, and in her eyes, Marcus saw the same fear that had defined her for so long. But underneath it, something stronger. Hope. I want to marry you. I want to adopt Emma. I want us to be a real family. Marcus felt his heart stutter. Tell me again. All of it. I want you. I want Emma. I want Grace. I want messy family dinners and bedtime story arguments and school pickup rotations. Victoria's voice strengthened with each word. I want to fight about whose turn it is to change diapers and whether pancakes are better than waffles. I want the whole complicated, terrifying, beautiful mess of it. One condition. Fear flickered in Victoria's expression. What? You have to promise to always do the voices when you read bedtime stories. Emma's very particular about that. Victoria laughed through tears. I promise. I solemnly swear to do all the voices, even the scary monster ones, for as long as we both shall live. Then yes. To all of it, yes. They sat together in the hospital room darkness, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them, and Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. One night that was supposed to mean nothing. A pregnancy that should have been manageable. Secrets that were supposed to stay buried. All of it unraveling into something neither had planned, but both desperately needed. Margaret Powell visited the next morning, bringing flowers and the board's official decision. Victoria was welcome to return whenever she was ready, with full support and zero pressure. The company had survived worse crises and would survive this one. Take the time she needed, be with her family. The corner office would be waiting. Margaret stayed after the flowers were arranged, settling into the visitor's chair with the expression of someone who had more to say. Your wife Sarah and I worked together for 6 months before she got sick. She was consulting on strategic expansion, financial forecasting. Brilliant analyst. Better human being. Margaret's voice went soft with memory. She told me about you, about Emma, about her hopes for both of you. And she said something I've never forgotten. Marcus leaned forward. What? She said, my husband will change your company someday, not through spreadsheets or presentations, but by showing people what real integrity looks like. He'll make them better just by refusing to be less than he is. Margaret met Marcus's eyes. She was right. Yesterday in that boardroom, you didn't just defend yourself. You reminded us what we're supposed to stand for." The words hit harder than any board vote or reinstatement could. Sarah had believed in him when he'd barely believed in himself, had seen potential he'd been too afraid to claim, and she'd planted seeds for a future she wouldn't see, teaching Emma lessons about courage and love that were paying dividends now. "She'd be proud of both of you," Margaret continued, looking at Victoria. "Sarah told me once that the best thing about loving someone wasn't finding perfection. It was watching them choose to be brave." After Margaret left, Victoria pulled Marcus close. "I want to visit her grave. When I'm well enough. I want to bring Emma and Grace and tell Sarah thank you for raising such an extraordinary daughter, for teaching you to risk loving again. She'd like that. She always said death didn't mean the end of relationships, just different kinds of connection." 2 years passed with the ordinary chaos of family life. Emma turned 9, her heart condition stable enough that surgery had been postponed indefinitely, something Dr. Martinez called one of those medical mysteries we're grateful for, even if we can't explain it. Grace transformed from wrinkled newborn to toddler with opinions about everything, particularly her sister's stuffed animal collection, which she believed belonged to her. Victoria returned to Sterling and Associates after 6 months, but on different terms. She stepped down as CEO in favor of a co-leadership structure that let her focus on strategic planning while delegating operational management. Richard's arrest had created space for organizational reform, and Victoria used it to build something healthier than her father's autocratic model. Marcus accepted a position on the board, the first black board member in Sterling's 70-year history. He kept his analyst role too, finding that the two positions complemented rather than competed. Emma was right. Love multiplied instead of dividing. They married in a small ceremony with Emma as maid of honor and Grace as flower girl, though at 18 months, she mostly just wandered the aisle eating petals. The adoption paperwork for Emma went through 3 weeks later, and Marcus would never forget the moment his daughter became legally his and Victoria's both. Emma had cried, happy tears, she insisted, and hugged Victoria so tight Marcus thought they might both stop breathing. Emma's 4th grade class assignment was My Family, and she chose to present on the anniversary of Sarah's death, a date the family had transformed from mourning into celebration of the life Sarah had lived and the love she'd left behind. Marcus and Victoria sat in the back of the classroom with Grace squirming between them, watching Emma set up her presentation with the confidence of a child who knew exactly what story she wanted to tell. "I have 2 mothers," Emma began, clicking to a slide showing Sarah's photograph. "This is Mommy Sarah. She was a doctor and she saved lots of people, but she couldn't save herself from cancer. She died when I was 3, so I don't remember everything, but I remember she was brave." The next slide showed Victoria at their wedding. "This is Mama Victoria. She's a CEO, which means she runs a really big company. She was scared to be a mom at first because her mom gave up everything, and she didn't want to do that. But then she learned that love doesn't make you smaller. It makes you bigger." Emma clicked to a photo of Marcus. "This is my dad. He was really sad after Mommy Sarah died. He forgot how to smile for a long time. But then he met Mama Victoria, and they made my sister Grace. And Dad remembered that being scared doesn't mean you have to stop living." The final slide showed all 4 of them at Grace's 2nd birthday party, messy and laughing, and absolutely imperfect. "Mommy Sarah watches from heaven. Mama Victoria teaches me on earth. Dad holds everything together, and baby Grace teaches us all to laugh. My teacher asked if I was sad having a complicated family, but I think all families are complicated. Mine's just honest about it." Marcus felt Victoria's hand find his, felt Grace settle into his lap with the contentless of a toddler who knew she was safe. Across the room, Emma beamed at them with Sarah's eyes and Victoria's determination and her own hard-won wisdom. "Love doesn't divide," Emma concluded, her voice clear. "It multiplies. I have 2 moms, 1 sister, 1 dad, and a whole lot of people who chose to be family even when it was hard.
That's not sad. That's lucky.
The classroom erupted in applause, children clapping because everyone else was, parents because they recognized truth when they heard it. Marcus clapped too, his vision blurred, thinking about the journey that had brought them here. One night that changed everything. Fear that almost destroyed them. Courage that saved them. That evening, the family gathered at Sarah's grave with flowers Emma had picked and a letter Grace had written, mostly scribbles, but Victoria insisted on bringing it anyway. Marcus knelt and traced Sarah's name on the headstone, feeling Victoria's presence beside him and his daughter's hands in his. "We brought someone to meet you," he said quietly. "This is Victoria. She's teaching me that second chances aren't betrayals. And this is Grace, Sarah. She's got your middle name and your stubbornness." Emma added her own message. "Hi, Mommy. I have a new mom now, but you'll always be my first mom, the one who taught me to be brave. Mama Victoria says thank you for that. She says you gave her the best gift, a family that loves even when it's scary." They sat together in the quiet cemetery, 4 people connected by love that had survived loss and fear and every obstacle they'd faced. Grace babbled something incomprehensible, and Emma translated with complete confidence. "She says hello to Grandma Sarah." Victoria pulled both girls close, and Marcus wrapped his arms around all 3 of them, his past and his present and his future woven together in impossible, beautiful complexity. Later, at home, after the girls were asleep and the house had settled into nighttime quiet, Marcus found Victoria on the back porch, watching stars emerge. She'd taken to this spot during pregnancy and never stopped claiming it, her refuge from the chaos of work and toddlers and the ordinary stress of building a life. Emma's presentation was extraordinary. Victoria leaned into him when he joined her. "Sarah raised an incredible child. We're raising an incredible child. Both of them. Do you think she minds? Sarah, I mean? That I'm here? That I'm Emma's mother too?" Marcus considered the question seriously, thinking about Sarah's last instructions to live instead of just surviving. "I think she's grateful. You gave me permission to stop being afraid. That's exactly what she wanted." They sat in comfortable silence, and Marcus thought about Margaret Powell's words from 2 years ago. The best thing about loving someone was watching them choose to be brave. He'd watched Victoria choose courage over control, vulnerability over armor, family over the corner office she'd spent 20 years proving she deserved. "Are you happy?" The question slipped out before Marcus could stop it, vulnerable in a way he still wasn't entirely comfortable with. Victoria turned to face him, her expression open in the moonlight. "Yeah. For the first time in my entire life, I'm actually happy. Not successful, not accomplished, not proving anything to anyone. Just happy." "Say it again." She smiled, understanding the callback to all those moments when he'd demanded she mean what she said. "I'm happy, Marcus Thompson. With you, with our girls, with this messy, complicated, beautiful life we've built. I'm so happy I sometimes can't believe it's real." Through the window they could see Emma's nightlight glowing in her room and hear Grace's baby monitor broadcasting soft sleep sounds. 2 daughters, 2 mothers, 1 father, 1 family built from grief and fear, and the stubborn refusal to give up on something that mattered. Marcus pulled Victoria close, breathing in the jasmine scent she'd worn since the night they'd first talked about loss and loneliness. "I love you. Both of you. All of you. The ice queen and the scared woman, and the mother learning to do the voices. I love you too. Thank you for not running." For standing in that boardroom and choosing the hard thing instead of the safe thing. Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. "For teaching me that weakness isn't the same as vulnerability, that needing someone doesn't make you less, that love is always worth the risk." Inside, Grace's cry interrupted the moment, not distressed, just awake and wanting company. Marcus and Victoria moved together without discussion, practiced partners in the midnight routine of parenting. They found Emma already in Grace's room, having heard her sister through the thin walls, reading a board book with elaborate voices, while Grace watched with fascinated attention.
The monster said, "I love you, Max, but like he really means it,"
Emma was explaining, her voice pitching deep for emphasis. Grace giggled and clapped her small hands together. Marcus and Victoria stood in the doorway watching their daughters, and something passed between them without words. This was what they'd almost sacrificed for safety, for reputation, for fear dressed up as practical choices. This ordinary magic of children laughing at midnight, a family built from courage instead of convenience. Emma looked up and saw them watching. "I got it, Dad. You can go back to sleep. I'm good at being a big sister now." "Yeah, baby. You really are." They returned to their room, and Marcus pulled Victoria close in the darkness, thinking about all the ways his life had transformed. The scared, grieving widower who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what connection felt like. The woman who'd confused control with strength until a 7-year-old taught her the difference. Two broken people learning to be whole together. "Marcus?" Victoria's voice was drowsy, already drifting toward sleep. "If you could go back and change what happened, that night at the gala, everything that came after, would you?" He thought about the question seriously. All the pain, the fear, the professional damage, the moments when he'd been certain they wouldn't survive. Balanced against Emma's wisdom, Grace's existence, Victoria's transformation from Ice Queen to someone who read bedtime stories with voices. "No, I wouldn't change a single moment, because it brought us here." Victoria's hand found his in the darkness. "Me neither. Good night, Marcus." "Good night, love." Outside, the city hummed with millions of lives being lived, each one as complex and beautiful and messy as theirs. Somewhere, people were making the same choices Marcus and Victoria had made, choosing courage over comfort, vulnerability over armor, love over the safe certainty of loneliness. And somewhere, Marcus hoped, they were finding the same impossible grace that had saved him, the same grace that wore Sarah's name and had her stubbornness, the same grace that multiplied instead of dividing, that transformed fear into strength, that proved his wife right one final time. Life wasn't a prison sentence to be served perfectly. It was a choice to be made, over and over, every single day. And Marcus Thompson had finally learned to choose well.